John.
How's it going, Brandon? Have a good long weekend?
Yeah, man. May 2-4 weekend. What'd you get up to?
Some very outdoorsy socializing, distanced, saying hello to people from 9 feet away, sitting in a backyard. It was good.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. You got people together and stuff or what?
Well, no, I don't. I only have a small back deck. I don't have a very big house. But we went to my daughter's best friend's house. We sat in their backyard and had some burgers, a couple of beers. All 6 feet away from each other, and then we left.
Oh yeah. That's the way it is, man. That's the way it is. Social distance barbecues. Well, that's cool. So, yeah, no, we had a good weekend. I was saying it's funny in the meeting today. I was telling everybody my win is that I actually got to kind of take a bit of a break because usually we're working all the time. So I really did that, and I got a haircut.
I know, man, looking sharp.
Yeah, man. Eileen did it for me in the backyard. So I told her she's got a future. She's got a future in cutting hair, but I don't think she's going to do very well if she opens up a salon because she was too much of a perfectionist. But I got to tell you, getting on YouTube, right, and actually being able to it looks okay. It was great. She watched a couple of YouTube videos and then got her done. All right, so let's dive in. So let's talk about work permits today, because you know what, John?
What's that?
Everybody always asks about work permits. Do you have the same?
Lots of questions about work permits.
Everyone's always asking about work permits.
All the ins and outs and everything. Of course, if we've said before, if you can get into Canada on a work permit, your permanent resident options go like that.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's, before we dive into work permits, we got a few people that are already giving thumbs up on that. Hussein and MD Jacker. Sorry, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologize. But MD, we'll just MD. I like that, MD. MD and Hussein, thanks for giving us a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in. So before we do that, let's dive in. So John, why don't you introduce yourself, buddy?
Morning, everybody. My name is John Leroney. I'm based out in Surrey, BC, suburbs of Vancouver. I'm the owner and operator of Gateway Pacific Immigration Limited, which you can find out more about it at gatewaypacific.ca. I've been in the immigration biz for, over 20 years, but I've been running my own show for about 17. And I do all sorts of immigration, except sort of complex humanitarian and refugee stuff. But over to Brandon. Brandon, tell us about you.
Well, thanks, John. So my name is Brandon Miller. I'm in Toronto, Canada. I have a company called Maple Immigration Services. But John and I have recently collaborated. Not recently, it's been a little while. We've collaborated on Second Passport. What Second Passport is it's an opportunity to empower yourself to your own journey, which means that you can actually do your application yourself, do it with some help, or have us take care of it for you. So that's what it is. But the idea behind Second Passport is, and anything immigration in general, is to make sure that you have a plan put together, then you can implement it. And the other important element that a lot of people overlook is the settlement side of it. So not to shamelessly self-promote anything, but we do have a challenge coming up on July 19th. And this is usually the first step for people, where you can actually go get your plan put together and have all that, and then basically, put it into action. So that's the idea behind that. But today we're going to talk about working in Canada and work permits, because this is something that we always get questions about. And we wanted to dive in and address some of those questions. So let's dive into types of work permits. So there's open work permits, closed work permits, post-grad work permits, co-op work permits. John, why don't you tell us what those are all about?
Sure thing. So an open work permit is, what it sounds like. It's open. You can work for anybody. There are some restrictions, and there are limited to jobs in the medical field, where you would have to get a medical done before you could work in those. It's usually not just the medical field, but working with vulnerable adults, kids, elderly, working in a care home setting. or a medical one. But even then, with a work permit and a medical tacked on, you could again work for any employer in Canada. What it means is that an employer does not need to get permission to hire you if you show up on his or her front door with the open work permit.
Yep.
Open work permits are available to the spouses of somebody who's already in Canada on a work permit or a study permit. And they're open to some other people as well, which we'll get into later, who are here on bilateral agreements between Canada and another country for youth mobility. What other open work permits?
Bridging open work permit?
Bridging open work permit, which is a work permit that you can get if you have an application for permanent residence in processing under one of the economic categories. There's an open work permit available for people who've submitted a joint application for permanent residence and sponsorship inside Canada. An open work permit can be available for the permanent resident applicant, so he or she doesn't sit here and go nuts and rot on the vine while their application for PR ticks over, which can take about a year. There's an open work permit for postgrads. So the postgrad work permit, which we'll get into a little bit more later, is also an open work permit. And let's get into it now.
Let's get into it now.
You want to get into postgrad work permits?
A lot of people, it's a pretty simple one, and there's a lot of people that have questions about it, mostly with students who are coming. So, generally, if you've studied for a year, you get a year. If you studied for 2 or more, you get a 3-year open work permit. Yep. I don't want to get into all the details on that because that's not, we've only got a half an hour here, actually 20 minutes left. So we don't really want to dive into the minutia of the details. But, there's things like you have to be at a DLI school that offers a post-grad work permit. You also need to stay full-time except in your last semester, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there is some criteria that you need to follow. I can tell you, I just did one right now with the school. She came to me, she filed her own post-grad work permit and it was refused, and it shouldn't have been refused. And it's kind of crazy because we're seeing a lot more of these mistakes lately. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of this too, right?
As well, yeah.
It's crazy. But co-op work permits as well. Those are basically attached to if you have a program of study where there's a work component, obviously co-op. But I think that I guess we're going to jockey back and forth between open work permits and closed work permits, depending on the different type of program. So what's the next program we want to discuss, John?
Well, let's look at the corollary, the closed work permit. What is a closed work permit?
Yeah.
So a closed work permit it's a work permit, and listed on it is a specific employer, like Dave's Restaurant or whatever. Usually a specific national occupation classification, chef, to go with Dave's Restaurant, and usually a location too. It usually is limited to a province. It'll say British Columbia, or sometimes it's more specific. It could be a city. But what those are is that those are work permits where, as a first step, the employer has gone out and obtained permission to hire a foreign national, either through a labor market impact assessment or a provincial nomination program. And with these, if you have a closed work permit, you can't simply jump ship from your employer. You are tied to that employer. And if you want to not only change employers, but change jobs within the employer's purview, that's a whole nother process which can take a lot of time. Now, I'm not knocking closed work permits, but they are, if you have a job as a chef at Dave's Restaurant and you want to get out of that, it's a long process to get out of that. Brendan, thoughts?
I think you've hit it pretty hard, right? So again, closed work permit is a closed work permit. You're working with an employer, and that's it, right? I think we should jump ahead a little bit though too. We'll get into some of the open work permit stuff, the global talent and different things like that. But let's talk about, because we're talking about closed work permits, let's talk about what is an LMIA, because these are generally attached to the closed work permit process generally. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Sure. So the acronym that you see there before you, everybody, is LMIA, which means Labor Market Impact Assessment. Now, it's a highfalutin, fancy word for written permission from the government of Canada to a Canadian employer to hire a foreign national. So what happens is a Canadian employer, Dave's Restaurant, goes, you know what? I really need to hire some chefs. I will recruit from abroad. So Dave's Restaurant throws in the LMIA, meeting all the requirements, which are lengthy and, which is, I think, a whole nother episode, but we'll just talk about now about meeting those requirements. Information about the job, information about Dave's company, the salary, the position, the location, all the pertinent details. You fill out a form, you send in the supporting documentation to the government, Employment Services Development Canada is the department. Roughly speaking, 2 to 3 months later, a decision is rendered and a piece of paper is given to the employer. And the employer it's permission to hire the foreign national. And then the employer gives that piece of paper to the foreign national. The foreign national goes off and applies for his or her work permit. That's what a labor market impact assessment is in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's basically a process that the government goes through to make sure that you're not taking away a job from a Canadian, that it is a valid job offer and it's in demand, while at the same time that it's a bona fide job offer where the employer can meet their obligations. And then, it gives permission for, IRCC to be able to, grant a work permit because it's a component to it. All right, guys, if you're watching live here too, you feel free to throw in any questions that you have, and we can certainly take those. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we'll talk about the global talent stream, because this is something that's really I don't know if have you worked in this, John?
I think I did one a very long time ago, so memory is not serving me well right now. So
I'll tell you what, I've done more than a few of these, and I love this. I love it. And the reason I love it is because the whole idea behind the global talent stream was that it was a way to get people here quickly into Canada, generally in in-demand jobs, usually in the tech industry. Okay. So there's different, again, I've done videos and everything on all this before, so I don't want to dive too deeply into it. If you have some questions, you can throw them in there and we can certainly address those. But the way it works is that if you're in a tech occupation, like a computer engineer, a web designer, software engineer, something along those lines, then you can actually apply for this. And the processing time is generally a month, but it's 2 weeks and 2 weeks, right? For both. And it's actually even quicker than that. I've actually had an officer say to me, because the employer was taking their time a little bit, they said, listen, if you're not ready to go ahead here, I'm just going to close it out and you can reapply. Because they were really watching their stats in terms of the processing time, because they really wanted to hit that deliverability in terms of that, in terms of being able to get that done within the processing times. That I love. There's two different categories. There's category A and category B. Category A is somebody that's going through a designated partner. Designated partner is basically somebody who's endorsing the hiring of the worker. The interesting thing about this is that list keeps expanding and expanding. I remember from the outset of the program, there wasn't very many, there was a few, but every time I look at that list, it seems to expand and expand, which is awesome. Category B is when you're seeking to hire an in-demand worker found on the list of particular jobs, right? So it's very specific types of jobs. The processing time, as I mentioned, was about 2 weeks, and the work permit is the same. So you can have somebody here in a month, which is very quick. Also of note, I don't know if you saw it, but there was an article in the Toronto Star this weekend that Nicholas Kyung had done, which is the immigration reporter. And I haven't read it. I just kind of earmarked it there because I do want to read it. But they were talking about the pressure that's going on in the U.S. right now and the hiring that's going to go up and how that's going to affect Canada. Again, as I said, I just saw it. It was out on Twitter there. And I haven't read it, but I can tell you right now, Global Talent Stream, that's what this is in place to fix, is to basically get tech workers in place very quickly so that they can start working on this type of work permit. So that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome stuff. It's a great program to work in too. I love it. Love it. It's a very collaborative approach, and yeah, really love it. Okay, let's talk about IEC really quickly, because this is something that a lot of people have some questions about. Because hopefully it's opening up very soon. Very soon. It's already open in certain respects, but we're starting to see. I was speaking with somebody there about a week ago. No, less than that. Wednesday. So yeah, almost a week. And they had their stuff in the pool, and they just got an invite for it, which is awesome. So why don't you want to give a breakdown of the IEC, John?
Sure. So the IEC is another acronym, International Experience Canada Program. What this is Canada has signed a series of bilateral agreements with other countries, most who are within, I'd say, the European Union, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, a handful of other countries, where the agreement stipulates young people, and this fluctuates between 18 and 30 to 35, depending on the country you've signed the agreement with, to allow them to come in, get a work permit for a minimum of 6 months, that's the one with Italy, I believe, to a maximum of about 2 years, which is what the Australians get. And it's an open work permit. You come in, and it's also referred to as a working holiday visa. Again, it's an open work permit. It's unrestricted, except the medical provisions that may exist, as I said before. And what we find with this is you have a lot of young people come in, and a percentage will come to Canada for 2 years and work and enjoy themselves and then return. But many will stay. Many will transition to permanent residence. And providing you take a look at what kind of job experience you have, education, any potential job offers in Canada, your transition to permanent residence can be quite smooth.
Yeah. So I'm going to add on to that a little bit. So what John was saying about the bilateral agreements and whatnot, there's 3 different streams to this. I've only worked in 2. I haven't done anything with the international co-op. Haven't needed to. I don't know if you have or not, but there's a working holiday and there's the young professionals. So the working holiday obviously is a working holiday, but the IEC program usually gets called just the working holiday visa, I find, with that.
Yeah.
It's important to note that there's the different streams. Young professional means that you have a job offer with an employer already. Currently under COVID, a lot of people, the program was somewhat closed to people with just open work permit, like working holiday stuff, because they didn't have an employer and they didn't want them kind of fronting up. So they didn't want they want people with a place to go, so to speak. So the young professional's been open in that respect. The other thing is that there's something called recognized organizations. Have you dealt with these before, John?
No, I have not.
So if you look on the website, I haven't dealt with it either because it's dealt with through the organization. So normally, as John alluded to, there's a bilateral agreement between 2 countries, and that's how these things happen. If your country doesn't have, and usually they're reciprocal in nature, and John used the example of Australia, Canadians can actually go to Australia and work there and get similar to what we have with IEC, the working holiday. Canadians, if they're under the age, I think it's 35 for Australia, they can go and they can work down there. So that's how these quotas and everything happen. With that said, though, if you don't have a nationality where you're actually, if you don't have a nationality that falls under the agreements, you can use a recognized organization, which will come in and get you a job for an in-demand type of job. And you can actually still access the program through that. Now, I will tell you this, because I've seen somebody on a tertiary thing. I saw one person that was working and paying a lot of money to use that organization. And I kind of was like, that's interesting. You're working a good chunk of your year for free. But anyways, I'll leave that comment to the comment. But yeah, it was, I yeah, I just kind of was curious about that. So
Yeah.
maybe shop around if you're looking at some of the recognized organizations. I won't name drop there, but I was kind of a little shocked. And strangely enough, it was I was on a plane coming back from Hong Kong, and she came up and she was asking. I was traveling with my wife, and she asked my wife a question. I said, "You couldn't ask a better person, because here's everything that you need to know in terms of clearing customs and different things like that." So anyways, needless to say, we kind of kept in touch. I gave her my card, and she was out in Calgary doing some stuff, and yeah, we got to meet up with her in Banff, so that was fun. But anyways, yeah, but she had a good time. So what else? Anything else with IEC? I kind of went off sideways there.
No. The only thing I would add to that is if you find that you have two citizenships, sometimes you can stay on working holiday visa for 4 or more years in Canada. For example, there's many situations, especially people who have parents who say emigrated to Australia from Britain and they have British and Australian citizenship. They can participate more than once in the program, so they often take advantage of that. I think what we should do for our remaining time, Brandon, is to move back to LMIAs, but talk about exemptions to LMIAs. What do you think of that? Do you think that's a good idea?
I do, but I want to say one other thing about IECs, because it just popped into my mind really quickly. One of the biggest dangers that I find with the IEC work permits is that one, people waste their time on them a lot. And the biggest thing is they'll come and they'll activate. Like, I actually saw somebody come and activate their work permit and then leave for it was a 1-year IEC, and then they left for 10 months. Because they had to go back, they couldn't find a job or whatever, and it was I was like, man, you just waste it. And then the other thing is too is that, so be mindful of when you're activating it. Just because you arrive doesn't mean you have to activate it. That's the first thing. And secondly, if you're thinking or you want to keep your options open for work here, I would strongly suggest that you what's the word I'm looking for? That you educate yourself on what types of jobs qualify for permanent residency, because I see a lot of people that have been here, they're either working a job and it doesn't actually qualify them, or what they'll do is they'll be like, hey, you know what? I kind of like it here, but they haven't been doing all the stuff that they need to do to continue working and use that, that coveted Canadian experience to stay. Wow. So I see that a lot. Anyways, let's dive into LMIA exempt stuff. I'm going to let you do that because I know this is your jam, John.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work in this area. So we've described what an LMIA is, and then the government, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, has a long list of exemptions to LMIAs, which means providing that an employer meets some specific criteria and the worker as well, there's no need to apply for an LMIA. There are several subcategories. One is under international agreements, and this is basically treaties that Canada has signed with other countries. Big one being NAFTA, CUSMA, but there's other ones that Canada has signed with numerous Latin American countries. The CPTPP, which is a Trans-Pacific
partnership.
Canada is with 11 other countries, and there's some labor mobility there. Canada and the European Union, Canada and Britain. So again, I mean, I could spend hours talking about the minutiae of this, but it's safe to say if you have a job offer in Canada with a Canadian employer, and they meet the criteria as defined within these bilateral treaties, in some cases, it's as simple as getting the job offer, the employer paying a small fee and registering the job at a portal, which takes half hour. And COVID aside, you could arrive at a Canadian airport and get your work permit in half hour. It's that fast. But again, very situation specific. And then there's other LMI exemptions that have to do with what they call Canadian interests. The Canadian government has said, look, it is in our national interest to have these workers come in quickly and perform this type of work.
Yep.
There's that. There's also lesser, I wouldn't say lesser, but less used ones that cover vulnerable workers, humanitarian situations. but mostly the biggest amount of traffic in the LMIA exemptions are those international treaties and what they call Canadian interest.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head with that. So let me ask you a question, John.
Yeah.
If you have a choice between LMIA or no LMIA, what are you going to do?
Oh, without fail. It's the first thing I do when I have an employer or if somebody comes to me and says they have a job offer in Canada and they give me the details of the job offer, the first thing I do is I go to the LMIA exemptions and see if I can squeeze them into that. Why? First of all, the employer doesn't have to pay $1,000 in processing fees to get the LMIA. The employer doesn't have to do any advertising to try and recruit Canadians. I mean, we didn't really discuss it a few minutes ago, but the LMIA process can be complex.
Horrible.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and of course, it's human nature. Can I avoid a lot of cost and hard work? Of course. So if there's an exemption to the LMIA, I suss it out, and I only advise employers to apply for LMIAs if there's no LMIA exempt option.
You know what? It's funny. I did a consultation with a guy who's from Australia, and he's got a job offer, and he's like, "Yeah, I need an LMIA." And I went through everything with him. I'm like, last thing I'm going to do is sign you up for an LMIA, because he's under the threshold to apply for IEC. Mm-hmm. And because he's got the job letter, he can actually go through and do the young professionals, which is actually being processed. And it was funny. I was looking at the pool for the IEC, and it said for the working holiday. I mean, you've seen all the little smiley faces they put on there. I don't know, it's not good, and it's got a little sad face on it. And then it's got your chances are excellent, and it's got big happy face. I'm like, oh, little emoticons on the IRCC website, but they have those there. But that's exactly what it reads. So part of what we do when we do consultations and stuff. A lot of people. I know this is veering off a little bit, but you know what? Let's wrap it up here anyways. But what I find is that a lot of people will come in and they're looking like this, right? And they're like, oh, I want an LMIA for this. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't put you through that. A, I'm going to charge you way too much money. And B, it's complicated for you and for me and for everybody else. And we don't want to do it.
And C, people can't apply for LMIAs. Only Canadian employers can apply for LMIAs.
Correct.
If the employer isn't on board, it's not even an option. Not even an option.
Yeah, and that's it's funny you say that, because people say to me they're like, oh, I want an LMIA. I'm like, I want to talk to your employer. Oh no, he's fine. I'm like, listen, first off, it's your employer's application. Your employer's not going to like what people get charged for those, right? Because A, you've got the advertising component, you've got the professional fees, all the other stuff. And the other thing is that when you start telling employers that they have to start putting in financial information and all these different things to the government, they tend to get a little skittish, even though they've already filed their stuff with CRA and everything. I find that's the litmus test. If you can speak to the employer and they can say, yeah, I'm good with all that, I need it, okay, no problem. But yeah, I don't listen to people when they call me up and say, I need an LMIA. I'm like, okay, let me talk to your employer. Let's see how they feel about it. Because, and I actually sit there and hammer it with the employer. Here's what you're up against, sir. But anyways, listen, let's leave it at that. Let's stop there. I think we've been about a half an hour. So
yeah, we could talk about this for hours. I mean, this could go on and on and on. There's so much to know. We really only scratched the surface.
No questions today, though. We got a few thumbs up, but no questions today. I thought we'd have a lot more questions about work permits, John.
Well, for those of you who are watching, come back Thursday. We can always answer questions about work permits on Thursday.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So let's leave it at that. So again, we're here every Tuesday and Thursday at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. That's Canada time. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us. If you have more of something that's a little bit personalized in nature, because again, we do have people that will reach out and we'll ask some questions that are a little bit more personalized. Please feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to help. And if maybe you require a consultation or whatnot, we can do that as well. All right. Other than that, I guess we'll leave it there. John, man, have a great rest of the short week.
Yes, yes. Take care, everybody.
All right. Take care, man. Have a good one, John.
Bye. Take it easy.
Take care. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Take care, guys.